All right, everyone, good morning. Hopefully you can all hear me okay. My name is David Rodriguez. You also might know me on Twitter as Effort Capital. I'm a research analyst at Blockworks Research, and I'm here today to talk about how to make ATOM Interchain Money. But the real MEV is Ethan Buckman coming up here on stage earlier before I was able to give my presentation and say that ATOM isn't Interchain Money. So I was able to make a last-minute change and call ATOM Interchain Capital. So I think Yusuf did a really good job earlier today, kind of talking about the process of how AEDAO came to be, and I guess one of the things he mentioned was the Tokenomics RFP that he put out, or that him and AEDAO put out earlier this year. So I think ATOM 2.0, not to harp on it again, but really woke up the eyes of the wider Cosmos Hub community and made everyone realize the status quo of the Cosmos Hub of ATOM today, the tokenomics around ATOM, are probably not sustainable for the foreseeable future. There's really no way of aligning ATOM to the growth of the wider interchain economy that it ultimately birthed back in 2017, 2018, 2019. The ATOM Tokenomics RFP that they put out, 3 teams ultimately ended up winning that. Blockworks Research, which obviously I'm a research analyst as part of that, we're predominantly focusing on the growth of liquid staking in the wider interchain economy and what that means for ATOM's monetary and fiscal policy. Binary Builders needs no introduction, the great stewards of the Cosmos SDK and obviously running the Builders program underneath the ICF. They're predominantly focusing on how to align the ATOM economic zone and the wider interchain with the Cosmos Hub, leveraging things like protocol and liquidity or even core development incentives. And then RMIT is a team of academic economists based out of Australia, and what they're focused on is how to make shared security a profit-generating business for the hub and make sure that we have a sustainable value capture mechanism for the wider ATOM economic zone. One thing that I want to make clear is when you looked at ATOM 2.0, there's a lot of good ideas that I personally think were directionally correct, but they tried to get everything passed at once. Taking lessons learned, and again, Yusuf already kind of said this earlier, so I don't want to bring it up too much, but there were a lot of lessons learned from ATOM 2.0. Maybe the ideas themselves the community liked, but they did not want to push everything all at once as one signaling proposal. These are 3 separate teams that are working on 3 separate work streams, and there might be some very light dependencies across them, but overall, what we plan on doing is a phased approach where there's 5 to 10 governance proposals over the span of multiple months that we make sure that one step at a time we actually gain social consensus along the way and let ultimately the Cosmos Hub community choose the future of what the Cosmos Hub is and what the future of ATOM is. So what makes something capital? I won't say money. I think that there's everyone hears the same 3 characteristics, right? It's store of value, medium of exchange, unit of account. But I personally like to bucket these things into 2 different things. There's the intangible, and then there's the tangible. I think for the most part, money, or at least the store of value narrative for money, is a social construct. If enough people believe that something is a social value, store of value, then it ultimately becomes one. And I think ATOM has this relatively within the Cosmos ecosystem. Despite not having any service provision outside of replicated security up until recently, despite all the drama, despite not being used as the IBC gas token of the network, ATOM is still the token that most people hold in the ecosystem today. It is the asset that every other asset in the ecosystem is compared to. It is the numeraire of the Cosmos ecosystem. And I think that obviously, the thing that it doesn't have today is the medium of exchange and unit of account. It's not predominantly used as gas on most of the ecosystem chains in the wider ecosystem. Yes, it has a dominant position as a liquidity pair for the ATOM Osmo pool or the ATOM USDC pool on Osmosis. But it doesn't really have some of the tangible things yet anyways, reinforce the social contract that I believe it already has. But you're starting to see some of that change, Neutron, consumer chain that launched in the Cosmos Hub. Over 65% of transactions today are actually being paid in ATOM. And over the past month of September, you actually saw the amount of ATOM being used as gas fees on Osmosis creep up from 1% to 14%. So you're starting to see ATOM being used as money, as gas fees on the network, and also obviously a dominant liquidity pair in the wider ATOM economic zone. But take a step back, how do you create a flourishing economy? A physical economy, a digital economy, really doesn't matter. What it ultimately comes down to is the rule of law around secure property rights. In order to have in order to develop a flourishing economy on top, you need to know that what you own is yours, and that allows the market to freely and securely transact. And ultimately, what you look at historically is countries or sovereign nations that have strong security property rights usually perform better economically than ones that don't. And the reason why I think this is a lot of parallels to the Cosmos Hub is past 4 years, everyone likes to kind of like, there's a lot of drama around hub minimalism. It ultimately allowed the hub to kind of fall behind while the rest of the interchain that it gave birth to allowed it to grow. And I think there's a different side to that. I think the idea of hub minimalism actually allowed the hub to ossify as a security provider. And by ossifying as a security provider, it can now ensure secure digital property rights for every single consumer chain that leverages the hub for security. But there's a new phase, there's a new regime, or that was like the prior security regime of the Cosmos Hub. There's a new regime that launched with the liquid staking module back literally 2-3 weeks ago at this point, where now you can actually see the proliferation of ATOM, not just for securing the chain, but actually used as a predominant form of collateral in DeFi, potentially being used as gas fees on network, collateralized new stablecoins in the ATOM economics on wider interchain. So what we like to say is like the pre-LSM was like the security regime of the Cosmos Hub. Post-LSM, it's now the security and monetary regime of the Cosmos Hub. One of the problems that we see today with ATOM is its dynamic inflation schedule. So if you don't know, the inflation of ATOM is a function of the percent that is bonded to the network. And it can inflate to as much as 20% max and go as low as like a minimum 7% bound. In a pre-liquid staking world, this made sense. So rational actors, if you can stake your ATOM and get 15% yield, or if you can lend out your ATOM on, let's say, Mars, and you're able to get 20% yield, what would a rational actor do? The rational actor would pull their funds from staking ATOM, go deposit it in a liquidity pool or deposit it in the lending market in order to get like the higher yield on return on capital. So the dynamic inflation model actually made sense because it allowed the proof of stake network for the Cosmos Hub to actually compete with DeFi yield and ensure that the security of the hub stayed true. But in a post-liquid staking world, this is really not the case anymore. Like you don't have to choose between staking or depositing your staked ATOM into a liquidity pool. You can do both at the same time. And we think that with the liquid staking world that we are now in, and it's ultimately inevitable, like the tokenomics of ATOM should appropriately reflect this new world that we're in. So what do I mean by like the uncertainty around ATOM's inflation? So what you see here is a scenario analysis based on the current parameters for the Cosmos Hub of how long it takes to get to the 7% min-bound inflation at different bond ratios. So about 4 weeks ago, approximately 70% of ATOM was staked to the Cosmos Hub. We were on pace to get to 7% min-bound inflation by end of 2024. About 2 weeks ago, a select few whales decide to unstake. They're fully right to. And we're currently sitting at about 67.5% staked. Doesn't sound like that big of a deal. But what that actually ended up doing is kicking out the time to reach min inflation by over 3 years. So we're not reaching, at current parameters say, we're not hitting the minimum inflation of 7% until July of 2028, when just 4 weeks ago, we were getting there by the end of next year. And this uncertainty, I think, hurts the monetary characteristics of ATOM, and there's also a bunch of other issues that I'll get into in a second. Also, by the way, that change in bond ratio, let's assume it stays that for the rest of the decade, that creates an additional like 13%, over 80 million ATOM that will be minted by the end of the decade with its current parameters that we know of today. Additionally, the Cosmos Hub is just straight out overpaying for security. If you look at ATOM, or if you look at the percent that is staked to the network as a function of its total supply, and how much it's actually paying its issuance rate on a year-over-year basis, ATOM's all the way in the top right-hand corner. The Cosmos Hub is anyways, sorry. If you look at other proof-of-stake networks, Solana, Aptos, Near, Cardano, they all have over 60% staked to the network, but they're only offering their stakers 5-ish% yield, and most of these are actually going to be going down 10 to 20% year over year for the foreseeable future. But for some reason, the Cosmos Hub is paying 14.5% in security. And on top of that, to add insult to injury, not only is it overpaying for security, half the validators can't even support the consumer chains, which is like the first like service provision for the Cosmos Hub to be like this pristine security provider. So we're not only overpaying for security, but we're like doing it completely disproportionately. Liquid staking lowers the cost of security. So what I mean by this is, again, like if you are a liquid staker, not only can you get your staking yield, you can actually now participate in DeFi. So because of this, the proof of stake network no longer needs to compete with the DeFi yields and can actually offload some of this cost of staking to ATOM onto the wider interchain economy around it. This also has additional benefits too, because in an ecosystem that surely needs liquidity, staked ATOM is the ideal form of capital that we would like to see kind of proliferate through the wider interchain economy. So in this new liquid staking world paradigm, just like the Cosmos Hub had to ossify to become a security provider for the past 4 years through hub minimalism, or whatever you want to call it, we think for ATOM to ossify, the supply schedule needs to ossify too. No longer can it be a dynamic inflation schedule where, I didn't even mention this earlier, but most chains in the ecosystem do not have, in crypto do not have a dynamic inflation schedule, usually set. The only two assets that have dynamic inflation as a function of bond is DOT and ATOM. But for ATOM to ossify, so should its supply schedule. So what we're proposing is a year-over-year decrease in supply in inflation on a block-by-block basis to about 3% on an annual basis. It'll approximately take to get till about 2026, 2027 to reach this 3% mid-inflation, and then we slowly, gradually decrease inflation at a slower pace for a long-term inflation rate over 1.5%. This 1.5% tail emission is kind of a minimum security budget in perpetuity. So if you look at the Cosmos Hub's tokenomics today, or the flow of funds, between the hub inflation and ICS revenue, 10% goes to the community pool for ad hoc spend proposals. 90% goes to ATOM stakers. They pay a little commission to the validators. And then there's liquid staking now with the LSM, and it imposes a 25% max cap. If you don't know, the LSM actually allows the Cosmos Hub to be cognizant of what percentage of its total supply is actually staked to the network. Is liquid staked. And this allows people to do DeFi things, whatever that may be. But when we think about this, liquid staking is inevitable, right? So the LSM imposes a 25% max cap on liquid stakers, but it only imposes it on on-chain providers. Coinbase, Kraken, all those other major institutions that you know and love or don't love, they can skirt around this max cap. So liquid staking is mostly a winner-take-all market, just because of network and liquidity effects. It has a large centralizing force, and you're already seeing this play out in Ethereum, right? Ethereum's trying to be this credibly neutral base layer. I know Ethan already talked about it, but Vitalik posted a really interesting blog post about minimum viable enshrinement, and they're already talking about the threat that Lido is to Ethereum's credible neutrality. I won't go into whether or not that's true or not, but they're already they succumb to the market forces, the centralizing market forces of liquid staking. And I would argue, while the liquid staking module is a really good concept, and it's something that I think Ethereum is probably going to copy, they copy everything from us, imposing a max cap that only affects on-chain liquid staking providers like Stride, Persistence One, and Quicksilver puts them at a structural disadvantage, and if anything, reinforces the market centralization forces of liquid staking, and predominantly on off-chain liquid staking providers. So we thought about, is there a better way of doing this? Is there a better way of allowing liquid staking to grow, but at least letting the Cosmos Hub kind of benefit from the growth of liquid staking and not creating as much of a structural disadvantage for partners like Stride that are actually leveraging the Cosmos Hub for security? So we took a step back and kind of thought, I hate using this term, but first principles, what are LST providers doing? It's not a perfect one-for-one analogy, but they're very similar to lending markets. So what I mean by that is you lend out your native asset, your native ATOM, you get back, you borrow a liquid stake derivative of your native ATOM, and instead of the interest rate that you pay a flat interest rate, a flat taker fee by that liquid staking provider. And when you think about it from this lens, Aave is a really good example. Their interest rates, based on how much of an asset is being borrowed against, or what is lent and what is borrowed against, is a function of how in demand for a given asset is Ethereum, right? So there's something called a utilization rate. If over X% of ETH is being borrowed from a certain money market on Aave, the interest rate spikes up. There's an optimal utilization target that Aave governance tries to decide, what is this optimum rate? If more than this utilization is being targeted, then the interest rate for borrowing ETH goes up. And we thought, why not have a very similar mechanism? Since the LSM is already cognizant of how much ATOM is being staked to network, why can't we create like a market mechanism that disincentivizes too much liquid staking, but allows liquid staking to grow and ultimately find like a market equilibrium between like how much is the right amount of liquid staking out there, should be out there. So this is a very similar like concept to the Aave interest rate curve. What we propose, we already kind of wrote a whole blog or forum post on the Cosmos Hub forum, is this idea of like a dynamic liquid staking tax. So we don't want to disincentivize liquid staking early on. Only about 2% of all atoms are liquid staked today. We do want to have this economic engine start because we do believe that like the growth of liquid staked atom is going to lead to like the growth of the wider interchain economy. So what we propose is having no tax for the first 25% of liquid staked market penetration. But the moment that over 25% is hit, there's a tax on, it's a flat tax on all liquid stakers. Native stakers, if you want a native stake and don't want a liquid stake, you can just sit there and chill with your atom. But if you want to go participate in DeFi, and because there's an added risk for a proof of stake network to allow liquid staking to grow, there should be some type of market mechanism that, again, finds like the right equilibrium for how much should be liquid staked out there. And again, as these are all governance-defined parameters that the Cosmos Hub can ultimately decide. They can decide, hey, you know what, we don't want the first 25% of liquid staking to not have a tax. We want to actually start this tax at 0. We want the optimum target utilization to be not at 33%, which is what we propose, and maybe we want it earlier. Ultimately, we want to give the keys to the community to decide like what is the right parameters to control the growth of liquid staking, but at the Cosmos Hub's benefit. So this allows the Cosmos Hub to actually gain tax revenue. It's like a speculation tax. Gain tax revenue from the growth of liquid staking, and then use this revenue for however they want to do with it. But what this liquid staking tax does, it creates like a liquid staking opportunity cost, we're calling it. It's like there's a yield spread now. There's a spread between native stakers, they're getting a certain yield, which is like the risk-free rate. And then there's liquid stakers getting that yield, but then getting deducted that tax rate. So what you see here is based on the proposed inflation schedule that we also propose, and based on like some of the parameters that we imposed as or proposed as part of this liquid staking tax, what you see here is like what is the amount of yield that a liquid staker at certain market penetrations of liquid staking, how much yield would they need to get in order to like make DeFi a positive EV opportunity for them? So I don't have it highlighted here, but like just to give you an example, let's assume 50% of all staked atom is liquid staked. And let's say you're in August 2025. It's the pinkish red line. Around August 2025, the difference between a native staker and a liquid staker is about 2.5% yield. So that means in order for me to feel like it's worth it to go liquid stake and do DeFi activities, assuming 50% of all staked atom is liquid staked, I need to get at least 2.5% yield to make it worth it. And again, this kind of lets the market find like a natural equilibrium for like how much liquid staking should there be. And it actually could generate like significant revenue. I didn't show it on here, but it can be on the orders of like hundreds of millions of dollars, depending on obviously the market price of Atom over the remaining decade. But now the question comes like, what do we do with this tax revenue? Do we burn it? Do we create like a flywheel? So like one of the things we talked about before, and I know Binary is going to be talking about it at a panel on day 3 and also a little bit today, is like, can the hub become like an enabler of the community? Not only is it, or of the Atom Economic Zone, not only is it a security provider, can we actually leverage the interchain capital to get the economic engine jump-started as like protocol and liquidity? So what you can do is like the more liquid staking there is, the more hub protocol and liquidity there is, it deploys that protocol and liquidity strategically to benefit the wider interchain and the Atom Economic Zone, which should therefore generate more revenue for the Cosmos Hub through its shared security offerings, and then that should also generate more liquid staking, and it kind of has this like nice flywheel effect. But what if we decide to burn the liquid staking tax? Blockworks Research is relatively objective. We want to make sure that like we've given the community these like keys to decide ultimately what they want to do. But an ode to EIP 1559, it's a really elegant market mechanism. The more on-chain activity there is on Ethereum, the more burn. Well, Cosmos Hub doesn't have smart contract capabilities, but the growth of liquid staking is like really close, it should be anyways, a really close proxy to the growth of the wider interchain economy and specifically around the Atom Economic Zone. More liquid staking, more economic activity, more burn potentially. So what you see here is, again, based on the proposed inflation schedule that we wrote about, at different amount of market penetration of liquid staking, if you burn this tax, you can start seeing like an artificial cap on how much atom there could be in circulation. In theory, if you really take this on the extremes, 100% liquid staking market penetration, you essentially have a set amount of atom out there. I doubt it's ever going to get to that point, but I think this is a really elegant way of aligning like the growth of the interchain economy with atom supply. Something that, again, Ethereum has done and a lot of other proof-of-stake networks have copied EIP 1559. So going back to the idea of protocol and liquidity, and I know I'm running out of time in I think a minute, but shared security by itself will be commoditized. Jahan and the Informal team wrote a really great blog post about this. They wrote about atomic IBC being this market differentiator, but ultimately, like when you think about it, rollups using either Celestia or Ethereum. I mean, Celestia is a great example. Data availability is like the major revenue driver for Ethereum from L2s. Settlement is mostly like a very low revenue driver for Ethereum stakers. And Celestia promises potentially to offer like 10x cheaper data availability. And there's a really good chance that rollups decide to move to like the cheaper infrastructure provider. Infrastructure ultimately does get commoditized. But on top of Atomic IBC, like how else do you set like a shared security offering that is a differentiated opinion or a differentiated market offering? If you bundle shared security with protocol and liquidity, one of the superpowers of the Cosmos Hub is its on-chain governance. Yes, it creates a lot of drama, but it's a bilateral shared security agreement that's like a new paradigm, in my opinion. Like one thing I like to say is L2s align with Ethereum, but Ethereum doesn't align with L2s. Ethereum is incredibly neutral. It does not care about the success of any given L2 that's built on top of it. But the Cosmos Hub it's kind of like semi-permissioned. It's saying, hey, we welcome you to join us as like as a shared security provider, and in return, like there's a shared success. The Neutron success benefits the Hub, and the Hub success benefits Neutron. You can't really say the same for, I think, a lot of the other shared security offerings. And I think the intention behind the shared security agreements that the Cosmos Hub and the wider Atom Economic Zone is generating is something that is like a market differentiator, and we should lean into that more. Now we should actually leverage our on-chain governance to ensure that like the growth of the Atom Economic Zone through protocol and liquidity, again, is like a market differentiator, and we get developers to start aligning with Atom. That concludes my talk. Thank you very much.